All right, let's finish chapter 1. Inside the crimson room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat at either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post, the words murmurous and uninflected, running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight, bright on his boots and dull on the autumn leaf yellow of her hair, glinted along the paper as she turned a page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arms. When we came in, she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. To be continued, she said, tossing the magazine on the table, in our very next issue. Her body asserted itself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. 10 o'clock, she remarked, apparently finding the time on the ceiling. Time for this good girl to go to bed. Jordan's going to play in the tournament tomorrow, explained Daisy, over in Westchester. Oh, you're Jordan Baker. I knew now why her face was familiar. Its pleasing, contemptuous expression had looked out at me from many retrograde pictures of the sporting life at Asheville and Hot Springs and Palm Beach. I had heard some story of her, too, a critical, unpleasant story, but what it was I had forgotten long ago. Okay, so this gives us a little insight into Jordan's character. There was clearly something written not about her that was not very kind. It was critical of her, so we can assume that maybe she did something that was dishonest. Again, this gives us some kind of perspective as who Jordan is as a human. Good night, she said softly. Wake me at 8, won't you? If you'll get up. I will. Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you anon. Of course you will, confirmed Daisy. In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of fling you two together. You know, lock you up accidentally in a linen closet and push you out to sea in a boat and all that sort of thing. Good night, called Miss Baker from the stairs. I haven't heard a word. She's a nice girl, said Tom after a moment. They oughtn't let her run around the country this way. Okay, so again, Tom is misogynistic. He believes a woman's place is in the home. So he's saying she should not be allowed to be independent and to run around the country taking care of herself. Who oughtn't to? Inquired Daisy coldly. Her family. Her family is one aunt about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's going to look after you, aren't you, Nick? She's going to spend lots of weekends out here this summer. I think the home influence will be good for her. Daisy and Tom looked at each other for a moment in silence. Is she from New York? I asked quickly. From Louisville. Our white girlhood was passed together there. Our beautiful white... Did you give Nick a little heart to talk on the veranda? Demanded Tom suddenly. Did I? She looked at me. I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yes, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us the first thing you know. Don't believe everything you hear, Nick, he advised me. Okay, so again, remember how Daisy is playing. She's pretending to be that silly, that goofy girl because intelligence is not valued. I said lightly that I had heard nothing at all, and a few minutes later I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful square of light. As I started my motor, Daisy peremptorily called, Wait! I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out west. That's right, corroborated Tom kindly. We heard that you were engaged. It's a libel, I'm too poor. But we heard it, insisted Daisy, surprising me by opening up again in a flower-like way. We heard it from the people, so it must be true. Okay, is Nick being honest? Is he a reliable narrator? Of course I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even vaguely engaged. The fact that gossip had published the Bannons was one reason I had come east. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of rumors, and on the other hand, I had no intention of being rumored into marriage. Their interest rather touched me and made them less remotely rich. Nevertheless, I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was to rush out of the house, child in arms, but apparently there were no such intentions in her head. As for Tom, the fact that he had some woman in New York was really less surprising than that he had been depressed by a book. Something was making him nibble at the edge of stale ideas, as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart. Okay, so Nick is kind of disgusted by what he saw and what Daisy and Tom's reality is and how they really choose to live their life. He doesn't understand why Daisy puts up with it, and he feels kind of like Tom is on the verge of having kind of like a midlife crisis when it's kind of, why should he be doing this? Already it was deep summer. A roadhouse roofs and in front of a wayside garages where new red gas pumps sat out in pools of light. And when I reached my estate at West Egg, I ran the car under its shed and sat for a while on an abandoned grass roller in the yard. The wind had blown off, leaving a loud, bright night with wings beating in the trees and a persistent organ sound as the full bellows of the earth blew the frogs full to life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw that I was not alone. 50 feet away, a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion and was standing with his hands in his pocket, regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements and the secure position of his feet upon the lawn suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself, come out to determine what share was his of our local havens. I decided to call him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction. But I didn't call for him, for it gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a single green light. Remember, whose light is that? Minute and far away, that might have been the end of the dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness. All right, so let's just chat a little bit. Nick is back home in West Egg. He and Gatsby are neighbors. They both live in West Egg. West Egg is new money. It is homes to those who have made their money. They lack the social connections. They don't have necessarily social connections. They might have made their money bootlegging, okay? They also do not have the refinement, the social class, the social stature to move to East Egg. These West Eggers, and you'll learn this with Jay Gatsby, they are characterized as lavishly displaying their wealth. They are also considered to have bad taste. They live in these Gothic mansions, and those that live in East Egg would never be seen in that. Our East Egg, again, is old money. It is conservative. It is aristocratic. Tom, he is characterized as being arrogant, dishonest, racist. He carries on a public affair and really doesn't care if his wife knows about it. Daisy tries hard to be shallow, but I think you probably think that deep down she's probably pretty intelligent. Jordan is dishonest. She comes across as bored and really empty. So, again, just take all these things into consideration. Chapter 2 is up next. You are introduced to the Valley of Ashes, Myrtle, and George Wilson.